Welcome to Mindful Moments. Nourish your mind on the go. This audio uses AI narration to present our original book analysis. Today we're diving deep into Alexis de Tocqueville's Democracy in America, this French aristocrat. He toured America in the 1830s, really dissecting this young democracy. But what's so fascinating is how relevant his observations remain, even in the 21st century. We're going to explore those core tensions that Tocqueville observes, like the push and pull between equality and liberty, how a majority could overpower individual rights, and the surprising influence of religion and social customs on American society.
Tocqueville wasn't just on a sightseeing tour, He was on a mission to understand what made American democracy tick, its strengths, weaknesses, and what it could reveal about the future of democracy itself.
So let's start with the foundation. Tocqueville was really intrigued by the Puritans and their lasting impact.
He saw them as setting the stage. Their fervent religious beliefs combined with a deep yearning for freedom. It created a unique starting point for American democracy, a stark contrast to European societies still clinging to their aristocratic roots. And this is crucial, because Tocqueville argued that the American Revolution didn't create American democracy. It simply accelerated a process that was already in motion.
So the revolution was like ripping off a Band-Aid, revealing what was already brewing beneath the surface.
Precisely. Tocqueville saw the seeds of democracy already planted in the soil of American society, ready to bloom. And speaking of seeds, one thing that fascinated Tocqueville was the decentralized nature of American administration. He spent a lot of time exploring how township democracy empowered citizens at a local level.
But he also recognized the potential downsides of this approach, right? Things like inefficiency and lack of national direction.
Of course, he saw it as a classic balancing act. On one hand, you have this vibrant local democracy bubbling up, and on the other, the potential chaos if things aren't aligned on a national scale.
And that tension leads us to one of Tocqueville's most famous and arguably most unsettling concepts, the tyranny of the majority. Not that America was a tyranny in his eyes, but he was warning us.
He was raising a red flag, highlighting the inherent danger in any system where majority rule reigns supreme. He wasn't just theorizing. He gave specific examples in the book of how this could play out, how the majority could silence dissenting voices and enforce a stifling conformity.
It's easy to assume that more democracy automatically equals more freedom, but Tocqueville reminds us that it's not that simple.
Exactly. It's a complex equation with trade-offs. And he also pointed to potential safeguards within the American system, particularly the roles of lawyers and juries, which he believed could act as buffers against potential overreach by the majority.
Let's shift gears for a moment and talk about another element Tocqueville found central to American democracy, the influence of mores and religion.
This might seem counterintuitive, especially in our modern world where we try to separate religion and politics. But Tocqueville argued that religion, especially Christianity, provided a crucial counterbalance to the excesses of democratic individualism.
So religion provided a moral compass, a set of shared values that prevented society from spiraling into pure self-interest, almost a force for stability and cohesion.
And it's important to note his comparison of this with European attitudes. He spent time analyzing differences in how Americans and Europeans viewed women, concepts of honor, ambition, and he attributed some of these differences to the influence of American religious beliefs.
So religion wasn't just some private belief system tucked away in personal life, but a public force shaping the very character of American democracy.
Precisely. And remember, Tocqueville wasn't claiming religion was a perfect solution. He acknowledged the potential for hypocrisy, especially when religion and political power become too intertwined.
All right, let's talk about another of his observations, that restlessness and ambition baked into democratic societies, what he called the restless spirit of democracy.
He saw how Americans were driven, always striving for improvement, seeking practical applications rather than getting bogged down in theoretical abstractions. It was a preference for action over contemplation, a desire to see tangible results. And this wasn't just in the political arena. He saw it reflected in American literature, art, even science.
Yeah, we can't ignore the elephant in the room, American commercialism. Tocqueville seemed both captivated and a little wary of it.
He was. He saw its potential as a source of energy and innovation, but also worried about the potential erosion of certain values. It's a tension we still grapple with today, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. Okay, we've covered a lot of ground. From the foundations of American democracy to the tyranny of the majority, the influence of religion, and that restless, commercially driven spirit. What was Tocqueville's take on the future of democracy?
Well, he was both optimistic and cautious. He believed democracy was on the rise, destined to spread. However, he also warned of its potential dangers to liberty. He envisioned a future where democracy could morph into a different kind of tyranny, one where individual freedoms are gradually eroded by the expanding power of the state.
So it wasn't all sunshine and roses. Democracy is a guaranteed path to freedom and happiness.
No. He urges us to be vigilant, recognizing that democracy needs constant tending. He warned of a future where equality could be achieved at the expense of liberty.
It begs the question, how do we as citizens in a democratic society balance the pursuit of individual freedom with the need for social cohesion and responsible governance?
$1 million question indeed. There are no easy answers. But grappling with Tocqueville's insights, understanding those inherent tensions and potential pitfalls can make us more informed, engaged, and prepared to safeguard the freedoms we cherish.
To truly understand the depth of his analysis, you really need to read Democracy in America yourself. It will challenge your assumptions, spark debates, and leave you with a much deeper understanding of the complexities of democracy, both then and now.
It's insightful how Tocqueville's analysis goes beyond the specifics of 19th century America. He pinpointed fundamental challenges inherent in any democratic system, challenges that are as relevant in the 21st century as they were back then.
And that's why it remains a timeless classic. If you're intrigued, I highly recommend picking up a copy.
And you can find a link in the show notes, along with a special discount for our listeners. And while you're there, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss any of our future deep dives. Into groundbreaking books. We're exploring a new book every week, unpacking the ideas that have shaped our world, and continue to spark debate.
Join us as we continue to nourish your mind, one deep dive at a time. Now, let's dig into some of Tocqueville's more specific predictions about the future of democracy. It's striking how some of his observations about America could be applied globally.
Take his famous prediction about America and Russia, for instance. He saw these two nations as embodying the future of democracy, one representing freedom, the other tending towards servitude. It's a fascinating parallel, especially considering global dynamics in recent history.
It's almost eerie how accurately that prediction seemed to foreshadow the Cold War era.
Indeed. History is rarely a straight line, and things have shifted dramatically since Tocqueville's time. But it speaks to his ability to grasp the underlying forces shaping the world. He wasn't just describing America, he was trying to understand the trajectory of democracy itself, where it could lead, and what challenges it might face.
And one of those challenges he kept coming back to was the tension between equality and liberty.
He recognized that the pursuit of equality, while a noble goal, could also threaten individual liberty. He envisioned a future where, in the name of equality, people might willingly surrender freedoms to a powerful central authority.
A sort of benevolent tyranny.
Precisely. He saw the potential for a new form of despotism, one where people are lulled into passive obedience, content with material comfort and security, less willing to actively participate in self-governance.
Trading freedom for security.
In a way, yes. And Tocqueville considered this an insidious form of tyranny because it's not imposed through force or oppression. It arises from within, from people's own desires for stability and well-being.
Tocqueville wasn't just a cheerleader for democracy, was he? He was keenly aware of its flaws and constantly urged vigilance.
Absolutely. He believed that the success of democracy hinged on the active participation of its citizens, on their willingness to challenge authority, defend their rights, and hold those in power accountable. He wasn't promoting blind faith in democracy. He was calling for informed engagement.
He was a realist. He saw the good, the bad, and the ugly, and he wasn't afraid to point them out. Let's dive into Tocqueville's take on American society itself. He spent considerable time observing how Americans interacted, their values, their aspirations. What were his key observations?
One thing that struck him was the American emphasis on individualism. He noticed how in a society with fewer traditional hierarchies, people were more focused on their own personal success and advancement.
The classic American dream.
Precisely. And while he saw the energy and drive this individualism unleashed, he also worried about its potential to undermine social cohesion. He saw the potential for excessive self-interest to erode civic virtue and lead to a decline in public engagement. Imagine a society full of entrepreneurs, each focused on their own ventures, but less concerned with the common good.
Which brings us back to his concerns about tyranny of the majority.
Exactly. In a society driven by individual ambition and material pursuits, the majority might be more easily swayed by charismatic leaders who promise easy solutions, even if those solutions come at the expense of individual rights and freedoms.
So it's not just about the structures of democracy, the laws and institutions. It's about the culture, the values, the very spirit of the people.
Precisely. Tocqueville believed that the health of a democracy depended as much on the character of its citizens as on the structure of its government.
It's like that old saying, a republic if you can keep it.
Exactly. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. It requires active participation, critical thinking, and a willingness to put the common good above narrow self-interest. It's a constant work in progress. Now, Tocqueville also had some interesting things to say about the role of women in American society.
This is where his analysis gets a bit more complex. And to our modern sensibilities.
Potentially problematic.
Yes, it does. Remember, Tocqueville was writing in the 19th century, and his views on gender roles were very much a product of his time. He argued that women and men had distinct roles to play in society, that women were best suited for the domestic sphere, while men were responsible for public life. He saw this division of labor as essential to the stability and well-being of American society.
But didn't he also acknowledge the intellectual and moral capabilities of women? He did, in fact. He argued that American women were, in many ways, equal to men in their intellectual and moral capacities. He even suggested that they might be superior in some respects, however. He still believed that their primary role was in the home, shaping the morals and values of the next generation.
It's a view that many would find outdated and limiting today.
Absolutely. But it's important to remember the historical context. Tocqueville was observing a very different society, and his views on gender roles were widely shared at the time.
Okay. I'm curious about another seemingly contradictory observation he makes. He talks about how Americans are simultaneously incredibly religious and deeply materialistic. How did he reconcile those two seemingly opposing forces?
That's a great question. It was something Tocqueville found both intriguing and at times perplexing. He recognized the profound influence of religion on American society. He saw how it shaped morals, values, even political discourse.
Earlier, we discussed his view of religion as a counterweight to the potential excesses of individualism.
Exactly, but he also saw how Americans were driven by a desire for material wealth and comfort, a desire that seemed to contradict their religious piety.
It's the classic American paradox. A nation founded on religious ideals, yet also obsessed with material success.
Right. Tocqueville didn't shy away from this apparent contradiction. He grappled with it throughout the book, trying to understand how these two seemingly opposing forces could coexist within the same society.
So how did he ultimately explain it?
He suggested that, for Americans, religion and materialism weren't necessarily in conflict. He argued that their religious beliefs actually fueled their material pursuits.
How so?
He observed that many Americans believed that material success was a sign of God's favor, a tangible indication of their righteousness. This belief, he argued, encouraged hard work, frugality, and a drive for economic advancement.
It's like the Protestant work ethic on steroids.
Exactly. This unique blend of religious fervor and material ambition, Tocqueville argued, played a significant role in shaping the character of American society.
It's a fascinating insight. He saw how religion, instead of being a force for renunciation of worldly desires, could actually fuel them, albeit in a way that was tempered by moral principles.
It's a complex and nuanced argument, one that challenges simple assumptions about the relationship between religion and materialism. It also highlights Tocqueville's ability to observe American society with a critical yet empathetic eye. He wasn't simply judging, he was trying to understand the deeper currents shaping this young nation.
He was a keen observer of human nature, wasn't he? Always looking beneath the surface, trying to understand the motivations, the desires, the fears that drive us.
Absolutely. And that's what makes Democracy in America such a rich and rewarding read, even centuries later. It's a book that invites us to think critically about the promises and perils of democracy, the complexities of human nature, and the enduring challenges of building a just and free society.
It's a book that stays with you long after you finish reading it. It sparked countless debates and discussions over the years.
It has, and that's a testament to its enduring relevance. Tocqueville's insights continue to challenge us, provoke us, and inspire us to think deeply about the world we live in and the kind of future we want to create.
So even though he was writing about America in the 1830s, his observations have a universal quality that transcends time and place.
They do. He was grappling with fundamental questions about power, freedom, equality, and the human condition, questions that are as relevant today as they were in his time.
Okay. We've covered a lot of ground, but there's still so much more to explore in Democracy in America. We've touched on the tyranny of the majority, the tension between equality and liberty, the role of religion and materialism, and Tocqueville's observations on American society. But his analysis goes even deeper, delving into the nuances of American political institutions, the legal system, the press, and the role of associations.
Right, there's a whole layer of analysis we haven't even touched on. For example, he was fascinated by the American system of checks and balances, how power was distributed across different branches of government, and the role of the judiciary in interpreting the Constitution.
It's like he was dissecting the American political system, trying to understand its inner workings.
He was, and he was equally fascinated by the role of associations in American society. He saw how Americans were constantly forming voluntary groups, from charitable organizations to political clubs, and he believed that these associations played a crucial role in fostering civic virtue and preventing the isolation that he worried could come with democratic individualism.
It's like those associations were a way for people to connect with each other, work together for a common purpose, and develop a sense of shared responsibility.
Exactly. And Tocqueville saw this as a vital counterbalance to the potential fragmentation and atomization of democratic society.
It's a reminder that democracy isn't just about voting every few years, it's about active participation in civic life, about engaging with your community, and working together to solve problems.
Precisely. And Tocqueville believed that the vitality of American democracy was deeply intertwined with this culture of association, this willingness of citizens to come together and address common concerns.
It's a powerful insight, and it's a reminder that the health of a democracy depends not just on its formal institutions, but also on the informal networks of relationships and shared values that bind people together.
Right. Tocqueville saw that democracy requires more than just laws and elections. It requires a vibrant civil society, a culture of civic engagement, and a willingness to put the common good above narrow self-interest.
It's a message that resonates deeply, especially in our own time when we often face challenges to democratic norms and values.
It does. Tocqueville's work reminds us that democracy is a fragile thing, one that requires constant nurturing and vigilance. It's not a system you can set up and then forget about. It requires active participation, critical thinking, and a willingness to defend its core principles.
He was calling for a kind of informed patriotism, a love of freedom that's tempered by a deep understanding of democracy's potential pitfalls.
Exactly. And he believed that education played a crucial role in cultivating this informed patriotism. He saw the American system of public education as essential to preparing citizens for self-governance, instilling in them the knowledge and skills necessary to participate effectively in democratic life.
He understood that democracy can't thrive in a society where people are ignorant or apathetic.
Right. He recognized that the success of democracy depended on an educated citizenry, one that's capable of thinking critically, engaging in reasoned debate, and making informed decisions.
He saw a potential for democracy to devolve into a kind of mob rule. If people aren't equipped with the knowledge and skills to govern themselves wisely.
Precisely. And this is why he placed so much emphasis on education, on fostering a culture of intellectual curiosity, and on cultivating a deep appreciation for the principles of liberty and self-government.
It's a message that resonates with us here at Mindful Moments. We believe that knowledge is power, that an informed citizenry is essential to a thriving democracy, and that lifelong learning is key to personal growth and societal progress.
Absolutely. And that's why we encourage you to delve deeper into Tocqueville's work. Read Democracy in America for yourself. Grapple with its insights, challenge its assumptions, and let it spark your own reflections on the state of democracy, both here in America and around the world.
Okay, we've explored a lot of Tocqueville's ideas, but there's one more key theme I want to touch on before we wrap up. His observations on the American character. The unique blend of traits and values that he saw as both shaping and being shaped by American democracy.
Ah, yes. The American spirit. Tocqueville was fascinated by it, both admiring and wary of its potential excesses. He saw a people driven by a restlessness, a desire for constant improvement, and a deep belief in their own capacity to shape their destiny.
It's that classic American optimism, the belief that anything is possible.
Exactly. And Tocqueville saw how this optimism fueled American innovation, entrepreneurship, and territorial expansion. He was amazed by the energy and drive he witnessed, the constant striving for something better, something bigger.
But he also saw a potential dark side to this relentless pursuit of progress, right?
He did. He worried that the American obsession with material success could lead to a kind of spiritual emptiness, a loss of deeper values in the pursuit of wealth and comfort. He also saw a potential for this restless spirit to manifest in a love of novelty for its own sake, a constant craving for change that could undermine stability and tradition.
It's like that saying, Americans love progress, even if it's in the wrong direction.
Exactly. And Tocqueville saw this potential for misdirected progress in the American tendency toward individualism, the elevation of personal ambition above the common good. He worried that in a society where everyone is striving to get ahead, the bonds of community and shared responsibility could weaken.
So he saw both the dynamism and the potential dangers of the American character, its capacity for both greatness and self-destruction.
He did, and this complex and often contradictory portrait of the American spirit is one of the most enduring legacies of democracy in America. It's a portrait that continues to resonate today as we grapple with the challenges of a rapidly changing world and the enduring tensions within American society.
It's a reminder that the American experiment is an ongoing project, one that requires constant reflection, debate, and a willingness to confront our own flaws and contradictions.
Precisely. Tocqueville's work challenges us to look inward, to examine our own values and aspirations, and to ask ourselves what kind of nation we want to be. It's a call to civic responsibility, to informed engagement, and to a deep and thoughtful patriotism.
It's a call that's as relevant today as it was in Tocqueville's time.
It is, and it's a call that we should all heed as we navigate the complexities of our own democratic journey. Now, before we wrap up, I want to circle back to something we touched on earlier, Tocqueville's observation about Americans' unique approach to knowledge and ideas.
He noticed that Americans tend to favor practical application over abstract theory. They're less interested in pondering the mysteries of the universe and more focused on figuring out how to build a better mousetrap.
Exactly. He saw this pragmatic approach in everything from their education system to their embrace of technology and innovation. It's a strength, of course, fueling American ingenuity and problem solving.
But there's a potential downside as well, right?
Yeah.
A risk of superficiality in intellectual pursuits.
He worried that in their rush to apply knowledge, Americans might neglect the pursuit of wisdom for its own sake. They might miss those deeper questions about the meaning of life, the nature of truth. It's a tension we still see today. That pressure to turn every idea into a product, a solution.
We need practical solutions, but we also need to hold on to that sense of wonder, a love of learning for its own sake.
I think Tocqueville would agree. His observations on this aspect of the American character offer a valuable perspective on the challenges and opportunities of living in a society driven by practicality.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground in our deep dive into democracy in America, from the Puritans to the tyranny of the majority, the role of religion, that restless American spirit, and so much more. If you're ready to explore these ideas further, we highly recommend picking up a copy of Democracy in America.
You can find a link to purchase the book in our show notes, along with a special discount for our listeners.
And while you're there, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss any of our future deep dives into groundbreaking books. We release new episodes every week, unpacking ideas that have shaped our world and continue to spark debate. We're on a mission to nourish your mind, one deep dive at a time.
Thanks for joining us, and happy reading.